I've spent much of my life in a love affair with America, and the few visits I've made to the States, I've been both frustrated and excited. I loved Broadway. I loved Disney. I I hated the cold of New York, and I I found I found the fake bonhomie really irritating. J.D. Vance is the epitome of what so many Europeans and Brits loathe about their first experience of America. But when you get to know it, there's something very attractive about it. It comes across as insular, moralizing, and imperious, and yet, perhaps annoyingly, and under the surface, like America itself, it's combined with intelligence, erudition, education, wealth, and ultimately power. Vance is this hillbilly crown prince countering the old world scorn with a contempt of his own. And for all his power, he remains at his core deeply condescending. Now, he knows he's smarter than his audience, and worse, he revels in it. I find that irritating. And I've been trying to ask myself why I find it irritating. It's not the same sort of irritation. I don't think I'm going to find myself warming to him in the end, as I do with America, as I do with um, as I do with so many people. I don't think there's going to be that transformation. The more I get to know about Vance, the more I dislike him, and that I think it's so many layers of him and contradictory layers as well. And that is infuriating. He's blunt and self assured. He's a man who certainly brooks no debate, whose conversion from anti Trump critic to Trump zealot suggests either a profound ideological revelation, a St. Paul Damascene moment, or a brazen opportunism that makes even the slipperiest of politicians look principled. And yet, even Nigel Farage, the king of rhetorical elasticity, finds Vance beyond the pale. Though, of course, Farage only criticises those he considers safe to criticise. He wouldn't dare attack the gerbil keeper himself, would he? He wouldn't dare attack Donald Trump. It's not just Vance's arrogance or his politics or his bluntness that makes him so grating. It's his transformation, I think. I don't like a turncoat. And not just any old turncoat, but one who cannot even claim, like many others, like me, frankly, that he was subversive for a reason. He once called Trump an idiot and compared him to Adolf Hitler. And now he's Trump's most vocal advocate, serving as a choir boy vice president in an administration that is redefining America's global position with a mix of self-interest and scorn for traditional allies. His flip is so complete, like an overripe pancake, like a pancake that has been so exposed to reality, it's mouldy. It's the hallmark of a man who doesn't simply follow power, but seeks to embody it, to inhabit it, to wash himself in it. Vance is Vance is the pancake smeared all over the place. I mean, he's smeared with the stuff. And Vance is more than just a personal irritation. He's more than a sort of than a hemorrhoid complaint. He's a sign of things to come. His skepticism towards America's role in global security mirrors a sentiment that Britain too will soon have to grapple with. When Vance asks what America has to gain by risking war with Russia, Britain will ask the same of its European commitments. When Vance demands that Europe should pay more for its own defence, Britain will begin to question why it shoulders an outsized burden without recompense. That's the result of Brexit. And it's wrong. It's equally wrong. The Trump-Vance strategy is a rejection of international law and the old order. It's a rejection of duty. It's a rejection of responsibility. It's also a rejection of the patronising paternalism. The shift towards a world governed by grand bargains between great powers. the backsheesh of the bazaar. If America's position is no longer sustainable in terms of honor, it's now sustainable in terms of trade. And in the same way, if that is true of America, it will be true about Europe's current security framework. Emmanuel Macron is probably there before anybody else in one of his more lucid moments, declared that the future of Europe cannot be decided in Washington or Moscow. He is right. He is right. But the reality is that European leaders are still scrambling to preserve the status quo. For all the grand rhetoric about strategic autonomy, the truth is that Europe has yet to reckon with the fundamental question that Vance has posed. If America will not fight for Ukraine, will Europe? And if the answer is no, then all the bluster about independence is just that, it's just bluster. All the bluster about alliance is just bluster. All the bluster about self-identity is just bluster if there's somebody more powerful than you standing next to you. Over the past month alone, Vance has outraged European audiences by claiming that free speech restrictions pose a greater threat to Europe than Russia, condemning Germany's firewall against the far-right AfD and sneering at Britain and France's offer of troops for Ukraine as coming from random countries that haven't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. A needless insult, and yet its sting comes from the uncomfortable truth it contains. The US no longer sees European military contributions as meaningful. Now, we could quite happily turn around and say, well, the US hasn't won a war in 30 or 40 years. It's put troops on the ground, it's made an effort, but in the end it's always run away. Our standing in Washington has been reduced to a combination of diplomatic pleasantries and nostalgic recollections of past alliances, and Britain, once America's closest ally, is now simply another supplicant hoping for a nod of approval. The Iraq and the Afghanistan wars, which remain open wounds in British politics, are seen quite differently in Washington. The US doesn't remember them as joint endeavours, it remembers them as their own wars in which Britain was a supporting actor at best, a liability at worst. As the historian Frank Ledwidge has said by 2007, American military leaders believed that Britain had been defeated in southern Iraq. Tell Prince Harry that. The UK's attempts to advise the Americans on counter-insurgency strategy were met with barely concealed disdain. When the time came to withdraw, it wasn't Britain but the US that decided the course of events, and the same in Afghanistan, with devastating consequences. The uncomfortable paradox of J.D. Vance is that his insults only matter because we are too weak for them not to matter. If Britain or Europe were truly independent of defence, in defence, then if they were able to act without American cover, then his words would be irrelevant. Instead, they sting because they are reminders of our dependency. And yet, if we become too strong, if we were to demand from Europe the same commitments that Vance demands from us, we would begin to sound more like him. We are caught in a Nietzschean dilemma. To fight the monster, we risk becoming the monster. In the end, what is most galling about Vance is that he represents not just the failure of the liberal order, but the rise of the new breed of American politician who seeks neither to mend that order nor replace it with anything better. He's a product of his time, a man who has abandoned principle for power. You saw that in his embracing of Trump, whose bluntness is mistaken for honesty, whose condescension is tolerated because it's backed by the might of his country, because he has power, and because, frankly, he's cute in a gerbil-like way. I think I dislike Vance because he embodies everything that is infuriating about power, because he embodies so much that is infuriating about bits of America I dislike, because he doesn't seem to embrace those bits of America I adore. His theatricality is a sort of preppy nastiness that seems dull. And, I mean, you know, if he were to break into a chorus from Hello Dolly, I would like him, but I don't think he's going to. I dislike him uh, for his. Yeah, I dislike him for that sort of. I was going to say alpha male thing, but it's not alpha male. Trump is alpha male. What is Vance? Vance for the alpha gerbil thing. And that's what I dislike. And I dislike him even more because he's right about us, in ways that I would rather he wasn't. The difference is, of course, that, and it lies in his history. He's already changed his mind in a dramatic way, from being anti-Trump to being pro-Trump. He's had his Damascus conversion, and I don't think he's capable of doing another. But we are capable of change, and for that, I think we should be grateful to Vance because he's been able to hold a mirror up to us and expose the things which we are and which we can end up being, and we can change. We can change. To see ourselves as Vance sees us, well, that's something of a shock, and that's disturbing, and, we may not like the person who tells us, we may not like Vance for that, but we can change, and I don't think he can.